The envelope sat on my desk for 3 days before I opened it. Not because I forgot about it. Because something about it made me uneasy. It wasn't flashy. No bold lettering. No warning stamps. Just a thick, cream-colored envelope, heavier than normal mail, with my full name typed neatly across the front. No return address. No company logo. No reason to exist. I work in a corporate office downtown, the kind where mail gets sorted twice before it ever reaches your desk. Mistakes don't usually happen. If something lands in front of you, it's because someone intended it to. I slid the envelope under a stack of folders and told myself I'd deal with it later. But every time I reached for my coffee, my eyes drifted back to it. By Friday afternoon, curiosity won. I picked it up again and turned it over slowly. That's when I noticed the postmark. Dated 6 weeks earlier. My stomach tightened. Mail doesn't take 6 weeks to travel 3 miles. I checked the seal. It was intact. Carefully pressed. Someone had taken their time. I locked my office door. Then I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once. Not stapled. Not clipped. Just folded, deliberate and final. The words at the top knocked the air out of my lungs. Last will and testament of Margaret Ellison. My grandmother. My hands started shaking so badly I had to sit down. She had died 2 months earlier. And according to my parents, according to everyone, there was no will. I remembered the night they told me. We were sitting in their living room, the television off, the house too quiet. My father had cleared his throat the way he always did when he was about to say something that wasn't open for discussion. "Your grandmother didn't leave a will," he said. My mother nodded quickly. She didn't want the hassle. She trusted us to handle things fairly. I'd believed them. Why wouldn't I? They were my parents. Now I stared at the paper in my hands, heart pounding so loud I was sure someone down the hall could hear it. This wasn't a draft. This wasn't notes. This was notarized. Signed. Dated. And at the bottom, in smaller print, were the words that made my vision blur. If you're reading this, it means they didn't tell you. I swallowed hard. The office suddenly felt too small. Too quiet. Like it was holding its breath with me. I read the first paragraph. Then the second. Then the third. My grandmother's voice came through the words clearly. Direct, precise, unmistakable. She explained her decisions calmly, thoughtfully. There was no confusion. No hesitation. She had planned everything. And she had planned for this. The will outlined her estate in careful detail. The house she'd lived in for 40 years. Her savings. The modest investment account she'd grown slowly over decades. And then came the distributions. My parents, her son and daughter-in-law, were listed first. They were not excluded. They were not punished. They were given fixed inheritances. Reasonable amounts. Final amounts. So were my siblings. And then my name appeared. Not highlighted. Not praised. Entrusted. The house was left to me. Placed in a trust. With conditions. With oversight. With purpose. I felt tears spill onto the page as I read the line that explained why. Because Emily will tell the truth even when it costs her. I pressed my hand to my mouth. She knew. She knew exactly who would lie. Who would manipulate. Who would decide that handling things meant controlling them. At the very bottom of the page, in her unmistakable handwriting, was a final note written at a slight angle, like she'd added it as an afterthought. I mailed a copy to your office. I don't trust them not to lose it. I laughed. Just once. A short, broken sound that turned into a sob I couldn't stop. My parents hadn't misplaced the will. They hadn't misunderstood. They had hidden it. And my grandmother had known they would. I wiped my face, folded the paper carefully, and stared at the envelope again. This wasn't just a document. It was proof. And suddenly, every strange moment since her death began lining up in my mind, waiting to be understood. What I didn't know yet, what I couldn't fully grasp, was how far they'd already gone to erase her wishes. Or how hard they were about to fight to keep their secret buried. I didn't leave my office right away. I sat there with the will folded in front of me, my hands resting on either side like if I moved too quickly, it might vanish. Like it might turn into one of those cruel misunderstandings people later laugh about. But there was nothing funny about it. The more I read, the clearer it became. This document wasn't rushed. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't written in decline or desperation. It was precise, calm, thought through over years. My grandmother had been sharp until the end, which meant the story my parents told didn't just fall apart. It collapsed. I locked the will in my desk drawer, took photos of every page with my phone, emailed the scans to my personal account, and uploaded them to a cloud folder with a password no one would ever guess. Only then did I breathe. On the drive home, memories surfaced that I'd ignored before. Little things. At the hospital, the day my grandmother died, my mother had insisted on collecting her purse before anyone else went into the room. "I'll take care of her things," she'd said quickly. At the time, it sounded helpful. Now it sounded territorial. The funeral arrangements had moved fast. Too fast. No discussion. No debate. My father made decisions and announced them like conclusions everyone should already agree with. She didn't want a fuss. She didn't leave instructions. She trusted us. Those words repeated themselves in my head like a chant. Trusted us. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a long moment before going inside. If the will existed, and it did, then hiding it wasn't an accident. It was a strategy. That night, I called my brother. I kept my voice light. Casual. "Hey," I said. Random question. "Did Mom and Dad ever mention Grandma leaving a will?" There was a pause. "No," he said. "They told me there wasn't one." "Are you sure?" "Yeah." "Why?" "No reason," I replied. "Just thinking about stuff." After we hung up, I called my sister. Same question. Same answer. Same pause. Same certainty. That's when it hit me. They hadn't lied once. They'd rehearsed it. They'd told the same story to everyone. Which meant they weren't reacting. They were executing. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, new details surfaced. The way my mother snapped when I asked about Grandma's jewelry. "There's nothing sentimental," she'd said. "We've already sorted it." The way my father brushed off my suggestion to go through her papers. "Why dig things up?" he'd asked. "There's nothing there. Nothing there. Except a will they didn't want found." The next morning, I called in sick to work. Then I made another call. A probate attorney. Not the one my parents were using. Someone recommended quietly by a colleague who'd been through a messy estate battle years earlier. I didn't explain everything on the phone. I just said, I believe a will was intentionally concealed. There was a pause. Then, "Bring whatever you have." By noon, I was sitting in a quiet office across from a woman who listened without interrupting as I told her everything. She didn't react emotionally. She didn't gasp. She nodded. When I finished, she reached out and picked up the copy of the will. "This is valid," she said calmly. "And if your parents knowingly concealed it, that's serious." "How serious?" I asked. She met my eyes. "Enough that you should be very careful how you proceed." That night, my parents invited me to dinner. They sounded relaxed, confident. My mother even joked about dessert. I said yes. And for the first time since opening the envelope, I understood something clearly. They didn't know I knew. And that gave me power. The church smelled like lilies and floor polish. I hadn't noticed that the first time. Grief has a way of dulling the senses, blurring details that feel unimportant in the moment. But now, sitting alone in my car weeks later, parked outside the same building, Every memory from that day replayed itself with sharp, uncomfortable clarity. The funeral hadn't been about honoring my grandmother. It had been about control. I remembered how my father stood near the entrance, greeting people with practiced solemnity, intercepting conversations before they reached anything meaningful. "She didn't leave instructions," he'd say gently. "She wanted it simple. She trusted us to handle things." I'd heard those phrases so many times they'd started to feel true. But now I recognized them for what they were. Cover. Inside the church, my mother had kept her purse clutched tightly in her lap, one hand never leaving it. I'd assumed she was nervous, overwhelmed. Now I wondered what was inside. Documents, notes, a key. Or maybe just the knowledge that something important was being kept from the rest of us. After the service, people asked about Grandma's house. "What will happen to it?" a neighbor asked. "We'll decide later," my father replied smoothly. "There's no rush." There was a rush. The house was listed less than 2 weeks later. The speed should have bothered me. It didn't. Not then. That was the part that hurt most. Not that they lied. That I trusted them enough not to look. The dinner invitation replayed in my mind as I drove home. They sounded relaxed on the phone. Light. Almost relieved. Which meant they believed the story was over. That belief gave me space. The next morning before dinner, I drove past my grandmother's house. Or what used to be hers. A "for sale" sign stood in the yard. The windows were dark. The curtains she'd sewn herself were gone. I sat there longer than I meant to, staring at the front door, remembering how many times she'd opened it with a smile and a sarcastic comment about my being late. I took photos. Of the sign. Of the lockbox on the door. Of the moving truck parked down the street. Evidence isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just timing. At dinner, my parents were warm. My mother hugged me longer than usual. My father poured wine generously. They talked about nothing important. Work. Neighbors. A vacation they were considering. No mention of Grandma. No mention of the house. No mention of the will. Halfway through the meal my mother said, "You've been quiet." I smiled. "Just tired." She nodded, satisfied. After dessert, I excused myself to the bathroom. Instead, I stepped into my childhood bedroom and pulled open the closet. Everything was gone. Boxes missing. Drawers emptied. Even the old photo albums my grandmother had kept there for safekeeping were gone. I stood there staring at the bare shelves, my heart pounding. They weren't just hiding the will. They were erasing her. Back at the table, I sat down slowly. "Did you already clear out Grandma's house?" I asked casually. My father didn't even hesitate. "Yes," he said. "There wasn't much worth keeping." My mother nodded. "Mostly junk." Junk. The word echoed in my head. After dinner, I hugged them both. I thanked them. I told them I loved them. And then I went home and wrote everything down. Dates. Times. Statements. Because now I understood something important. This wasn't just about inheritance. It was about who got to decide what mattered. And my parents had decided, without telling anyone, that their version of events was the only one that would exist. Unless I stopped them. I didn't call my parents' lawyer right away. I wanted to see him first. See how he behaved when he thought I was still uninformed. I made an appointment under the pretense of clarifying a few things about the estate. His assistant sounded cheerful, unconcerned. Like this was routine. Like nothing was wrong. That should have scared me. His office sat on the 3rd floor of a brick building downtown, all polished wood and framed certificates. The kind of place designed to make people feel small and trusting at the same time. He stood when I entered. "Emily," he said warmly, extending his hand. "I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you," I replied, shaking it. We sat. He folded his hands on the desk and smiled. Too quickly. Too easily. "So," he said, How can I help? I took a breath. I wanted to ask about my grandmother's estate. Of course, he said. Your parents have been handling everything. They've done a very thorough job. I'm sure, I replied. But I wanted to understand the legal framework. Since there was no will. His smile flickered. Correct, he said smoothly. Your grandmother died intestate. I nodded slowly. Just to be clear, I said, you're certain there was no will? Yes, he said. None was ever presented. Presented. The word stuck with me. I reached into my bag and placed the copy of the will on his desk. The sound it made, soft paper against polished wood, felt louder than it should have. His eyes dropped to it. For half a second, he didn't move. Then he picked it up. And the smile disappeared. He didn't look at me. He read. The room felt suddenly smaller, tighter, like the walls were leaning in. This, he said carefully. Where did you get this? My grandmother mailed it to me, I replied. Before she died. To my office. He leaned back slowly, still holding the paper. That changes things. Yes, I said. It does. He cleared his throat. I'll need to verify its authenticity. Of course, I said. But before you do, I have a question. He looked up. Did my parents show you this document? Silence. Not confusion. Not surprise. Silence. I asked a yes or no question, I said. He set the will down carefully, as if it might explode. No, he said quietly. There it was. They hadn't forgotten. They hadn't misplaced it. They had never intended for him to see it. And you proceeded anyway, I said. Filed paperwork. Oversaw asset transfers. He exhaled slowly. I proceeded based on the information I was given. Information you didn't question. I had no reason to believe that my parents were lying. I finished. Or that my grandmother was meticulous. He didn't answer. I stood. I've already spoken to a probate attorney, I said. This meeting wasn't to ask for help. It was to understand how much you knew. He looked uncomfortable now. Defensive. I suggest, he said carefully, that you allow this to be resolved quietly. I smiled. Quiet is how we got here, I replied. I walked out without shaking his hand. In the hallway, my knees nearly buckled. Not from fear. From confirmation. They hadn't just hidden the will. They'd built an entire legal narrative around its absence. And now that narrative was about to collapse. What I didn't know yet, what none of them seemed to understand, was that the most dangerous moment in a lie isn't when it's told. It's when someone finally stops playing along. I didn't confront my parents right away. That was the hardest part. Every instinct in me wanted to slam the will down on their kitchen table and demand an explanation. I wanted to hear them scramble. To watch the confidence drain from their faces the way it had from their lawyers. But my attorney had been clear. Don't tip your hand yet, she said. Let them keep doing what they're doing. So I did something that felt unnatural. I smiled. I answered their calls. I went to Sunday lunch. I listened while they talked, freely now, about how exhausting it was to handle everything alone. About how much stress the estate had caused them. About how grateful everyone should be that they were willing to step up. They were already rewriting history. And because they thought I was still in the dark, they didn't bother to hide it. My mother mentioned casually that she'd already divided some of Grandma's jewelry among people who would appreciate it. I asked who. Oh, friends mostly, she said. Your grandmother wouldn't want things sitting in boxes. My father bragged about negotiating a higher price on the house. We knew how to present it properly, he said. Not everyone understands these things. I nodded. Asked questions. Let them talk. Every word they spoke was another brick laid carefully on their own collapse. Behind the scenes, my attorney filed the petition. Quietly. Formally. Irrevocably. The court accepted it faster than I expected. The judge ordered an immediate pause on all estate activity pending review, which meant the house sale froze overnight, which meant funds already distributed were now a problem, which meant my parents received a letter they did not see coming. I wasn't there when they opened it, but I heard about it later. The panic, the shouting, the frantic calls to their lawyer, who suddenly wasn't returning messages as quickly. My mother called me that evening. Her voice was tight. "Did you know anything about this?" she asked. "About what?" I replied. "The court filing," she said. "The estate being challenged." I paused just long enough. "Yes," I said calmly. "I did." Silence. "You did this?" my father demanded in the background. "I followed Grandma's instructions," I replied. My mother's voice sharpened. "You went behind our backs." I laughed softly. "No," I said. "You went behind hers." The line went dead. The fallout was swift. Family members started calling, confused, concerned, suddenly aware that something was wrong. I didn't explain everything. I didn't have to. The truth has a way of surfacing when lies collapse under their own weight. When the hearing date was set, my parents finally asked to meet. Not for dinner. Not casually. Formally. "We need to talk," my father said. "Yes," I replied. "We do." The courthouse was colder than I expected. Not physically, though the air conditioning was aggressive, but emotionally. Everything echoed. Footsteps. Voices. Even breathing felt amplified, like the building itself was listening. My parents arrived separately. That alone told me everything. My mother sat rigid, clutching her purse the way she used to when she was nervous but trying not to show it. My father paced near the wall, jaw tight, eyes scanning the room like he was looking for an exit that didn't exist. They didn't look at me. I sat beside my attorney, hands folded in my lap, heart steady in a way that surprised me. This wasn't adrenaline. It was certainty. When we were called in, the judge wasted no time. He spoke calmly, firmly, with a kind of practiced neutrality that somehow made the words land harder. "The court has reviewed evidence suggesting intentional concealment of a valid will," he said. "This is not a procedural oversight. This is a serious allegation." My mother inhaled sharply. My father finally looked at me then. Not with anger. With disbelief. Like he couldn't understand how I had gotten this far without his permission. The judge continued. "The will was authenticated. The notarization verified. The mailing timeline corroborated by postal records and my office's intake logs." The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Based on the evidence," he said, "the court finds sufficient cause to remove the current executors, effective immediately." My parents were no longer in control. Just like that. The house sale was officially voided. The proceeds frozen. Assets already distributed were ordered to be returned pending redistribution according to the will. My father stood up. "This is unnecessary," he said sharply. "We were acting in good faith." The judge looked at him over his glasses. "Good faith does not include hiding a will," he said. Silence swallowed the room. My mother started crying then. Not quiet tears. Loud, shaking sobs that echoed off the walls. "I was just trying to keep the family together," she said. The judge's expression didn't change. "Families are not kept together by deception," he replied. I felt something in my chest loosen. Not triumph. Release. Outside the courtroom, my parents finally confronted me. "How could you do this to us?" my mother demanded, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "How could you?" I asked quietly. My father stepped closer, his voice low and furious. "She turned you against us," he said. "Your grandmother. Filling your head with nonsense." I met his gaze. "She trusted me," I said. "Because she knew exactly what you'd do." He flinched. That was the moment I knew. Not because of the ruling. Not because of the money. Because for the first time, they couldn't rewrite the story. The court appointed a neutral administrator. A stranger. Someone with no emotional investment, no loyalty, no incentive to manipulate. Everything slowed down after that. Paperwork replaced posturing. Deadlines replaced excuses. And with each official letter, each court order, my parents lost another piece of the illusion they'd built. Extended family found out. Church friends found out. The story spread, not dramatically, not maliciously, but accurately. People started asking questions my parents couldn't answer. Why hide the will? Why rush the sale? Why lie? They stopped attending events. Stopped calling relatives. Stopped pretending. One night, weeks later, my mother called me. Her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. "I didn't think you'd go this far," she said. "I didn't think you would either," I replied. That conversation didn't end in reconciliation. It ended in truth. And sometimes, that's all you get. It took nearly a year for everything to settle. Not because the estate was complicated, but because the damage was. When the court appointed a neutral administrator, the tone of everything changed. There were no emotional appeals. No family discussions. No backroom decisions made over Sunday dinners. There was only paper. Receipts. Timelines. Transfers. Corrections. The administrator did what my parents never intended to do. He followed the will. Exactly. The house was restored first. Not flipped. Not rushed. Restored. The administrator insisted on honoring my grandmother's wishes to preserve it properly before sale. The same hardwood floors. The same front porch railing my grandfather built by hand. Even the garden in the back, where she used to kneel every spring despite her bad knees. When the house finally sold, it sold for more than my parents had negotiated. Irony has a quiet sense of humor. The proceeds were distributed precisely as written. My siblings received their shares. They didn't celebrate. They didn't apologize either. But something changed between us. They stopped assuming my parents' version of events was the truth. They started asking questions. And that mattered more than apologies ever could. My parents received their inheritance last. Reduced. Court fees. Legal penalties. Administrative costs. Every consequence accounted for. They never said thank you. They never said sorry. But they stopped pretending they were wronged. That silence was its own admission. As for me, I didn't rush to spend anything. I didn't announce anything. I didn't win publicly. I did something much quieter. I honored her. I donated a portion of the estate to the community center where my grandmother volunteered for 20 years. No plaque. No ceremony. Just a letter requesting the funds be used for adult literacy programs. I kept one thing from the house. Her desk. The old one with the shallow drawer she used for important papers. Inside it, after everything else was gone, I found a single index card. Written in her hand. Truth doesn't shout. It waits. I framed it. It hangs in my office now, right above my desk, where the envelope once sat. My parents and I don't talk much anymore. Not because I cut them off, but because control doesn't survive exposure. They still tell a version of the story when they think it benefits them. But it's quieter now. Careful. Because they know there's another version that can surface at any time. And they know I won't lie to protect them. That was the real inheritance. Not the house. Not the money. The clarity. The permission to trust my own perception. The understanding that loyalty doesn't mean silence. And that sometimes, the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for the dead, is to tell the truth when others are counting on you not to. My grandmother didn't leave me a fortune. She left me responsibility. And she chose me because she knew I wouldn't flinch from it. People still say things like, You must feel awful taking your parents to court. I don't correct them. Because I didn't take my parents to court. I took the truth there. And it held. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.